Hebrews chapter 12 and verse 1. I want us to look at that verse again. Hebrews chapter 12 and verse 1. Brother Mike read it just a moment ago. In this verse, the writer of Hebrews compares the Christian life to the running of a race. Again, Hebrews 12:1 says, "Wherefore, seeing we also are compassed about with so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which doth so easily beset us." And then he said this, "And let us run with patience the race that is set before us." And so again, the writer of Hebrews compares the Christian life to the running of a race. Now, as you know, when it comes to track and field, and I'm no expert by any means, but I know this much: when it comes to track and field, there are many different kinds of races. For example, there are sprints. When I was a kid, we called them dashes. We didn't call them sprints, we called them dashes. But there are sprints. And of course, sprints are typically very short but intense races, beginning with 100 meters and going all the way up to 400 meters. There are also what we could call middle and long distance races, beginning with 800 meters and going all the way up to 10,000. Think about that, 10,000 meter race. Now understand that's 25 laps around an Olympic sized track. And so you have sprints, you have middle and long distance races, and then of course there are marathons. Marathons are not measured in meters. Typically, they're measured in miles. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, a typical marathon is somewhere in the neighborhood of 26 miles. So when the writer of Hebrews compared the Christian life to the running of a race, I believe the race that he had in mind was a marathon. And I say that because if there's any race that requires patience, it is a marathon. And what did he say? He said, let us run with patience. Let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. I'm convinced that when he wrote about having finished his course, in 2 Timothy chapter 4, verses 6 and 7, when he wrote about having finished his course, he was looking back at his life, not as a sprint, or not as a middle or long distance race, but rather as a marathon. Listen to his words. He said, "For I am now ready to be offered, and the time of my departure is at hand. I fought a good fight. I have finished my course. I have finished my race. I have finished my marathon. I have kept the faith," he said. As I look back over my ministry here as senior pastor of this church, I must say that it has been much like a marathon, requiring both patience and endurance. By the way, the only marathon that I've ever run or ever will run. Just want to set the record straight. And so when the writer of Hebrews compared the Christian life to a race, I'm convinced that the race that he had in mind was a marathon. However, having said that, there is another kind of race that I believe would also be an accurate description of the Christian life. And that is a relay race. You know, I occasionally will watch a little track and field on television, and I love the relay races. There's just something about those races that I find super, super exciting. I guess primarily because not only does the skill and the speed of the runners figure into the race and who's going to win, but there's also the passing of the baton. I mean, you can run well, but if you don't pass the baton well, you can still lose the race. Amen? And so to me, the Christian life, even though the writer of Hebrews, I believe, had in mind a marathon, in my opinion, the Christian life can also be likened unto a relay race. How so, you ask? Well, think about it. When we pass from this life to our home in heaven, do we not leave others behind to continue running the race? Now, there's not an actual baton, I understand that. But it's like we are passing the baton to those who are coming up behind us, those who will pick up the race where we are leaving off. Now, there are actually several examples of this in God's Word. And this morning I want us to look at 3. For example, when Moses was about to end his race, he passed the baton to his protege, Joshua. You know the story. You might remember that although Moses brought the children of Israel out of Egypt, although he led them for 40 years in the wilderness, although he brought them to the very border of the promised land, because he disobeyed God and struck the rock the second time, God told him he would not lead Israel into the promised land. Listen to Numbers chapter 20, verses 11 and 12. Says, and Moses lifted up his hand, and with his rod he smote the rock twice. Now remember now, God told him to speak to the rock, not smite the rock. But he says he smote the rock twice, and the water came out abundantly, and the congregation drank, and their beast also. And the Lord spake unto Moses and Aaron, because ye believe me not, to sanctify me in the eyes of the children of Israel, therefore ye shall not bring this congregation into the land which I have given them. Now someone asked the question, well, other than the fact that God told them to speak to the rock rather than strike the rock, other than that, why was God so upset with Moses? Well, God was upset because in striking the rock the second time, Moses completely destroyed the type that God had intended. And if you know anything about Bible types, you know that this rock that we're talking about here in the Old Testament was a type of the Lord Jesus Christ. And you see, the rock, because the rock was a type of Christ, and we know that Christ was smitten only once for our sins, not twice, but once. And so when Moses disobeyed God and struck the rock the second time, he completely destroyed that type. 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 18 says, for Christ also hath once suffered for sins. Once, the Bible says, suffered for sins, the just for the unjust, that he might bring us to God. And so God told Moses that he could not bring the children of Israel into the promised land. And so just before that happened, Moses died. His race came to an end. However, before he died, Moses passed the baton to Joshua. Turn to Numbers 27, and I want you to follow along with me as I read these words. The book of Numbers, that's the fourth book in the Old Testament. So just go to Genesis and go forward 4 books, and you'll find the book of Numbers. Numbers chapter 27, beginning with verse 15. Numbers chapter 27, beginning with verse 15. It says, And Moses spake unto the Lord, saying, Let the Lord, the God of spirits and of all flesh, set a man over the congregation. And Moses knew that his life was about done. He knew that his race was almost complete, and he knew he would not be able to take the children of Israel into the promised land. And so he makes this request to God. Again, verse 16, Let the Lord, the God of spirits of all flesh, set a man over the congregation, which may go out before them, and which may go in before them, and which may lead them out, and which may bring them in, that the congregation of the Lord be not as sheep which have no shepherd. And the Lord said unto Moses, Take thee Joshua, the son of Nun, a man in whom is the Spirit, and lay thy hand upon him, and set him before Eleazar the priest, and before all the congregation, and give him charge in their sight. Thou shalt put some of thine honor upon him, that all the congregation of the children of Israel may be obedient. And he shall stand before Eleazar the priest, who shall ask counsel for him after the judgment of the Urim before the Lord. At his word shall they go out, and at his word shall they come in, both he and all the children of Israel with him, even all the congregation. Now look at verse 22. And Moses did as the Lord commanded him. And he took Joshua and set him before Eleazar the priest, and before all the congregations, and he laid his hands upon him, and he gave him a charge, as the Lord commanded by the hand of Moses. Now, as you know, having received the baton from Moses, Moses passed away soon thereafter. And Joshua then, of course, led the children of Israel into the promised land. Listen to something that God told Joshua just before that happened. Joshua chapter 1, beginning with verse 2. He says, Moses, thy servant, my servant is dead. Now therefore arise and go over this Jordan, thou and all this people, unto the land which I do give them, even to the children of Israel. Every place that the sole of your foot shall tread upon, that have I given unto you. As I said, listen to this, as I said unto Moses, there shall not any man be able to stand before thee all the days of thy life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with thee. I will not fail thee nor forsake thee. So what happened here? Moses came to the end of his race. And he makes this request. He said, Lord, we can't leave your people without a shepherd. And God said, I've got it covered, Moses. And he said, Moses, take Joshua and lay your hands upon him and give a charge to him. And so we see this passing of the baton. Moses comes to the end of his life. He comes to the end of his race. And he hands the baton to Joshua. And Joshua takes the baton and he takes the children of Israel into the promised land. That's just one example. But here's another example. When the prophet Elijah was about to end his race, he passed the baton to his protege, Elisha. You might remember the conversation that God had with Elijah when he was hiding from Jezebel in the cave near Mount Horeb. And after assuring Elijah that he was not the only one who had not bowed the knee to Baal, God then instructed the prophet to do three things. First of all, He told him to anoint Hazael to be king over Syria. Secondly, He told him to anoint Jehu to be king over Israel. And then God told Elijah to do this. He said, I want you to anoint Elisha. Not to be the king of Syria, not to be the king of Israel. He said, I want you to anoint Elisha because he is going to take your place. I want you to anoint him to be a prophet in your stead. And according to 1 Kings chapter 19, Elijah did just as God instructed him. Turn, if you will, to 1 Kings chapter 19. And I know we're taking some time to read these verses, but I want you to read them along with me. I want you to see these verses with your own eyes. 1 Kings chapter 19, beginning with verse 19. Says, so he departed thence. This is the prophet Elijah. He departed thence, and he found Elisha, the son of Shaphat, who was plowing with 12 yoke of oxen before him, and he was with the 12. And Elijah passed by him, and notice what he did. He cast his mantle upon him. And he, Elisha, left the oxen. He ran after Elijah, and he said, let me, I pray thee, kiss my father and my mother, and then I will follow thee. And he said unto him, go back again, for what have I done to thee? And he returned back from him, and he took a yoke of oxen, and he slew them, and he boiled their flesh with the instruments of the oxen, and he gave unto the people, and they did eat. Now look at this next verse. Then he arose, and he went after Elijah, and ministered unto him. Now later on, and I'm not sure how much time transpired between these two events, but later on, when time came for Elijah to be transported to heaven, we see the actual passing of the baton took place. Now look at 2 Kings. Just turn one book over, 2 Kings chapter 2, beginning with verse 9, and let's read about this. 2 Kings chapter 2, verse 9 says, it came to pass that when they were gone over, that Elijah said unto Elisha, ask what I shall do for thee before I be taken away from thee. And Elisha said, I pray thee, let a double portion of thy spirit be upon me. And he said, thou hast asked a hard thing. Nevertheless, if thou see me when I am taken from thee, it shall be so unto thee. But if not, it shall not be so. Verse 11. It came to pass as they still went on and talked, that behold, there appeared a chariot of fire and horses of fire, and parted them both asunder. And Elijah went up by a whirlwind into heaven. And Elisha saw it. And he cried, my father, the chariot of Israel, and the horsemen thereof. And he saw him no more. And he took hold of his own clothes, and he rent them in two pieces. Now look at verse 13. He took up also the mantle. It wasn't a baton. But he took up also the mantle of Elijah that fell from him. And he went back and he stood by the bank of Jordan. And he took the mantle of Elijah that fell from him. And he smote the waters. And he said, where is the God of Elijah? And when he also had smitten the waters, they parted hither and thither. And Elisha went over. Now again, it was a mantle that Elijah passed to Elisha rather than a baton, but it amounted to the same thing. By the way, did you know it was Elisha, not Elijah? It was Elisha who ended up anointing Hazael to be king over Syria. And it was Elisha, not Elijah, who ended up anointing Jehu to be king over Israel. Now what does that tell us? It tells us that indeed Elisha picked up where his mentor left off. And so the ministry of Elijah did not end when God took Elijah to heaven. That ministry continued because he passed the baton to someone else. Now there's a New Testament example of this, every bit as vivid. And that is when the Apostle Paul was about to end his race, he passed the baton to his protege, Timothy. You say, well, how do we know this? Well, we know this primarily because you know who Paul's final letter was addressed to? Anybody know? The last letter that Paul wrote before his ministry ended was to who? Was to Timothy. I don't think that was just an accident. I think that was on purpose. Paul's final letter before passing from this life was written to Timothy. And again, remember what he said? Paul said, I'm now ready to be offered. The time of my departure is at hand. I've fought a good fight. I've finished my course. I've kept the faith. Henceforth there's laid up for me a crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, shall give me at that day, and not to me only, but unto all them also that love is appearing. And then in the very next verse, Paul said this, do thy diligence to come shortly unto me. He writes this final letter to Timothy. And in the closing words of the letter, Paul says to Timothy, I need to see you now. And Paul knew that his race was coming to an end. My personal belief is there were some things that Paul wanted to tell Timothy before that day comes. And earlier in this same letter, you remember Paul said this to Timothy. He said, and the things that thou hast heard of me among many witnesses, the same commit thou to faithful men who shall be able to teach others also. In other words, Paul is saying to his young protege, saying, Timothy, I'm about to pass the baton to you. Therefore, you need to prepare to pass it along to others when the time comes. So these are three examples of what I call the passing of the baton. Moses passed the baton to Joshua. Where Moses' ministry came to an end, the ministry of Joshua began. Elijah passed the baton to Elisha. Paul passed the baton to Timothy. Now you ask the question, why is this so important? It's important because it ensures that the ministry will continue long after one leaves the race. Now, before I conclude this morning, I want to take just a moment. And I've asked God to help me to not be too emotional. But I want to take just a moment, and I want to thank you, First Baptist Church, from the bottom of my heart for the wonderful privilege that I've had to be your pastor for 46 years. I'm very, very grateful for that. And I also want to thank you for making it possible for me to step down as senior pastor but at the same time not have to step away from ministry in this church. You don't know what that means to me. Well, maybe you do, but you probably don't. I'm grateful for the past 46 years, and I'm grateful that you as a church, by your vote, our recent vote back on May the 15th for that Sunday night, to allow me the opportunity to continue serving in a different capacity, of course, but continue serving in this church. Thank you, First Baptist Church. This time I would like to ask Pastor Cawley if he would join me on the platform for just a moment. I did give him a little bit of heads up, not a whole lot, but a little bit, about what I wanted to do this morning. And Pastor Ryan, if you just stand right here for just a moment. Pastor Cawley, as you know, today is my last Sunday as senior pastor of this church. And by the grace of God, truly by the grace of God, I've carried this baton for 46 years. Not this one, but this is, I got this from Amazon last week. You know what I mean. I've carried this baton for the past 46 years. And Pastor Cawley, 18 of those years with you serving together with me at my side. However, the time has come for sure for me to step down and let someone else fill the shoes of senior pastor. Therefore, Pastor Ryan, it gives me great pleasure to pass this baton to you this morning. And while I will no longer be your senior pastor, I will continue to be your tormentor. No, not really. I'll no longer be your senior pastor. I look forward to working under you and with you for many years to come. How many years? I don't have a clue. As I shared with you a few weeks ago, I'm ready to step down as senior pastor, but I'm not ready to hang up my spurs just yet. And so, Pastor Ryan, again, it gives me great pleasure to be able to pass this baton to you. May the Lord be with you, and may the Lord bless your ministry as pastor. God bless you. Amen.
Thank you.
It's his fault. I was good until he hugged me. You can be seated. And to you, church family, may I say this, and then we'll move into our invitation. I fully expect you, and I believe you will, I fully expect you to love Pastor Cawley and his family the way that you have loved me for these past 46 years. I expect you to pray for him. I expect you to follow his leadership. I expect you to provide for his needs and the needs of his family. I expect you to defend him against unwarranted attacks. He is now your pastor. He is now your pastor. And as such, he deserves both your respect and your allegiance. And I believe he's earned that during the past 18 years. It's not very often that a senior pastor can resign his church and turn it over to someone who's already got 18 years invested in the same church. I know this brother. I know his heart. I know he loves this church the way that I do. And I believe with all my heart that he is the person, he is the man whom God will use to take this church where we need to go in the coming years. And I look forward to being a part of that journey. And so thank you, Ryan. And thank you, church. I want to ask Brother Mike to come, and if our pianist will return. We're going to have an invitation in just a moment. But just before we sing, let me see if I can make application of this message to all of us. There is application for all of us. For example, many of us in this room this morning are carrying a baton, are we not? We're involved in ministry. Some ministry. You're not the pastor. You're not the youth pastor. And by the way, Duncan, welcome to our staff. I wasn't trying to exclude you here, but we're so happy to have Duncan join us. And so this next Sunday will be his first official Sunday as our youth pastor. He jumped the gun. He moved his office in early. I told him to. But all of us, hopefully, are carrying a baton this morning. If you're not, you need to pick up one, okay? All of us should be involved in ministry. So let me say this. If you're involved in ministry and you're carrying a baton, my challenge to you is you carry that baton faithfully until the day that God makes it clear to you that you're to pass it off to someone else. And when that day comes, maybe you need to start praying for someone, for God to bring someone along behind you, that when the time comes, you can just turn around and hand that baton. But not until God finishes with you. So be faithful to carry the baton. Now, if you're not carrying a baton, you need to pick one up. You say, well, I don't know what baton to pick up. Pastor Colley will help you with that. And we have some new members of our church that are going to need to be getting involved in ministry. So I'm excited about that as well. But maybe you need to pick up a baton. You need to get involved in ministry. Commit your life to doing that ministry, and then faithfully carry that baton until God finishes with you. We're all in a race. In some ways, it's like a marathon. In other ways, it's like a relay race. Be faithful. To finish your leg of the race. And then willingly and joyfully be willing to pass that baton to someone else. And maybe then you'll become a cheerleader for a while. Maybe then you'll be ready for heaven. Who knows? Let's stand together. We're going to sing what number, Brother Mike?
381.
Number 281? 381. 381 in your hymnal. We'll have just a verse or two of invitation. If God has dealt with you on a personal level and you need to respond in some way, we'll give you opportunity to do that right now as we sing. Brother Mike.